Presentation is going to start with the gameplay and the game idea. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the creative process and the design of the actual game. So the idea first surfaced from a concept of games in second person, which is something that is quite rare. You see rarely in video games. And I thought it was an interesting concept. And I thought that taking that to gameplay and having the player, instead of control all the actions of the character, control most of them, but have the character have some self-will, I thought that could make the game quite unique. So yeah, this concept is interesting, but I feel like could not work in some genres. So I decided after some thought that 2D platforming could be the place to go with this kind of concept for several reasons. The platforming market on 2D for mobile games is massive, and a lot of them are very basic, but still get a lot of downloads. And also having two dimensions, it makes it a lot easier for me as a designer to design cues and user experience and user interface cues without much text to show things happening, like in that GIF above. And yeah, and the genre provides me freedom to create gameplay mechanics and also about the world. Yep. So the design is split in three. I'm going to talk about the core gameplay, some additional mechanics, and also about the story and the world building. So in order for the gameplay to be in context, I'm going to talk a little bit about the story and the world building first. Okay, so the story starts, so BlueJack is our protagonist, and he's a bit of a frivolous guy, and he receives a letter from the king. This letter explains that the king of the kingdom has been ill, and that he, because of this illness, he's been unable to rescue the kidnapped cards of Parliament, one of his most valuable subordinates. So BlueJack follows the Joker, the responsible for the kidnapping, and by following him, he collects the cards that he drops all around the kingdom. The Joker has been exiled from the kingdom due to a row with the king, and they had actually decided to harvest the Tree of Life in order to acquire its power. So the kidnapping of the cards was only a ploy to disguise the Joker's real intention. So the twist comes in the final battle when BlueJack has followed the Joker into his city, and it is revealed that the king was behind this all along. He is all-knowing, and he was bored from the peace of the kingdom, and he wanted no more power for himself. So therefore, he exiled the Jokers, knowing that they would then try to harvest the power of the Tree of Life, and then he would step in once that was collected and take it for himself. So in the final battle, BlueJack and the rescued cards merge using some of the life of the life tree, and they defeat, or this new creature defeats the evil of the king and the Jokers. So now this new creature called Blue Card has the perfect combination of randomness and knowledge to rule the kingdom in peace once again. So a little bit about the world building. The Round Kingdom is a world fueled by play. It takes inspiration from novels like Alice in Wonderland and games such as Cuphead, and it is powered by all types of games. Ball, street, card, tabletop games are the fabric of the world, and it's in the architecture and its inhabitants. The creatures love playing games, and they are made to support each other in order to play these games. An example is in the grasslands. There's two different creatures which together are able to create like a field ball game that without each other they wouldn't be able to enjoy. In the city, there's a lot more livelihood. There's markets, and people love playing cards and drinking tea and getting involved in the markets. The massive king's castle is made out of marble and has gigantic chess pieces guarding the walls. And in it live noble creatures who create new games for the population to enjoy. Past the castle is a magical forest, an area that's too dangerous for normal people to go to, and that hides a lot of power. So here's the world map. So as you can see, it was intended for BlueJack to go from the grass plot through the castle and the city, through the magical forest, through the swamp, and into the Joker's city at the end. The events here, I will explain a little bit more in the following slides, but this event is when the Jokers is revealed that they're actually harvesting the Tree of Life, and the last event is the boss fight, the final boss fight, and the event 0 is when BlueJack gets a shield that is used in gameplay. So the gameplay mechanics, the core mechanics, as I said, it's a 2D platformer. So the playable character moves horizontally through the level at a steady rate. Player can swipe up and down to move through the platforms. The character will fall through gaps and will wrap around the level. And there's a takeover zone, which I'll explain a little bit further, which is what makes the game really truly unique, and a score system that we'll explain as well. So there's also some additional mechanics. There's the card collection, which is a side objective. There's traps that can hurt the player. There's up to 3 AI zones, each with a different objective. There can be more number of platforms to make the game more difficult. There can be moving platform, fake platforms, enemies, power-ups. So from these, especially these last 3, the moving platforms and the enemies were not my idea. Kirsten came up with those, and I was initially a bit skeptical due to I wanted the core loops of the game to be quite solid, and I didn't know where that fitted. But I feel like that could be implemented in later levels when we want to increase difficulty. So this is an example level. So as you can see, there's numbers on each of the platforms at the start and at the end. So the idea of the score is you start, say, at number 2, and the objective number is 10. So then in order for the player to win, you have to end up at number 8. So you would have to add the first number to the last number, and the resulting number would be the score, and you would have to achieve a specific score. So yeah, as I said, in order to win, you have to achieve that specific score, and the player loses if that specific score is not achieved or if the character dies. So these are power-ups or untested ideas. As I said, just to make the game feel a bit more full, and so yeah, starting at the dice, if picked up, the platform numbers would be changed into random positions, and this would be a detrimental thing for the player, as you would have to recalculate the route that you want to do in order to achieve the objective. The stopwatch, there's 2 types: one that slows down time, that it helps the player, and one that speeds up time, that is not as good. And lastly, there's a hammer that, if picked up, it will shake the whole level and eliminate all power-ups and enemies. So the takeover zones are unaffected, as that is part of the core mechanics. And this is kind of a neutral power-up. There could be more ideas in the works, but I feel like these 3 are the main ones that I consider that could be implemented. So in terms of how I designed the game, I wanted it to be as minimalist as possible, with as least text and as least buttons as possible. So that is why the design supports that, because we have the core things that we need as the platform numbers. That is basically the only text that the player is going to see, apart from when there's any conversations between characters. And the core mechanics have been designed in order for the player to be able to learn them without there being any text. And I would also use animation in order to convey different status of the level. So these are the storyboards that I designed. I'm not going to go through them too much in detail, but these are the ones that I used to explain the mechanics to the other team member. These are the ones that explain the score. As you can see here in the bottom right, I intended to have the initial platform number follow the player as the player walked along. The reason for this is that if the level is too complex, the player can actually forget what platform they started on. So yeah, that was the way of working around that issue. And yeah, this is more about the score. And then at the bottom right as well, we have when the player gains the shield, they would be able to tap the screen in order to protect themselves from traps. But that never got implemented. Okay, so the next section of the presentation is market research. So the platform market for mobiles is very big. As you can see here, this is just platforming. So these are 3D games and 2D games. And there is a lot of money being made. But yeah, I'll mention what type of games make what money and why. So yeah, this second slide is 2D platforms. As you can see, there's not much difference, as most of them are 2D. But once we go into 2D side-scrolling platformers, there's quite a smaller amount of games. And I just wanted to mention how in some of these, we can, especially here in the top left, in the top 3 ones, they're literally just copies of Mario. And some of these games are, well, most of these games are purely arcade and action based. So the platform in general is at high at the moment. It's a market that is very stable, and therefore one that you would want to develop into, and especially one that gives way to innovation. There is quite a few different games that have different like subgenres inside 2D side-scrolling platformers that have like more arcadey kind of genres in the game, and that's why I feel like my idea would work very well, as it is not only being a platformer but also having the card element, and with the AI takeover, with the score system. I feel like that could really work quite well. And but these games, the ones that make a lot of money, are purely multiplayer based. And the reason is because people are going to spend more money on multiplayer games because they want to show off the new skin or blah blah blah. But the objective with this game is not to earn money. The objective, obviously, we would have ads in the game in order to generate revenue. But the main objective is to get as many people playing it as possible and gain some reputation. And then would also rely on secondary revenue generated through YouTube channels, Patreon, and Twitch, where we would share information about our development and just the team as a whole. So next up is requirements and planning. So I'm going to talk very briefly about some requirements. These are very vague. They're just in order for the design to work how it's intended. We need to have the software working as such, and these are the functional requirements. And these are the non-functional requirements. I just wanted to note that the levels are intended to be completed in a short amount of time. So because due to the fast-paced nature of the game, and because it's a mobile game, we want it to be something that you can jump into a level and maybe complete a few levels in 15 minutes while you're on the bus commuting to work or something like that. Okay, so next is the project breakdown. So this was the intended project breakdown, was how it was meant to be. I was in charge of I came up with the idea. I did most of the design. The project management was something that was meant to be shared, but then it wasn't. The same thing with the scheduling, and I was in charge of doing all the artwork, all the background, all the animations. Kirsten was in charge of managing the Unity project, which wasn't achieved to a good enough standard, and to code the core mechanics. So what actually happened was that I ended up doing those things. The project management actually fell through after 1.5 months due to a lack of involvement from the other member of the team. And I was actually doing a little bit too much in that department, as I was the only one doing the project management and assigning tasks and assigning times. And sometimes it takes a bit of time to learn how the other team member works and how long they might take to do certain things. So that is why it was encouraged for the other team member to also do some of the planning. But that didn't happen. And I ended up doing some code structure for the AI takeover, which we'll see a little bit later. And I actually did code some parallax backgrounds. And Kirsten, I don't know, she worked on a few extra mechanics, but the core mechanics weren't fulfilled. Okay, so during the initial weeks of the project, we agreed to use an agile development plan using sprints, and the fact that it was agile gave us a little bit of flexibility in order to learn how much it would actually take us to achieve certain tasks. So yeah, the reason of flexibility was the main reason why we chose an agile method. And I found and decided to use Monday.com. It's an agile planning online platform. And the reason why I chose it is because we could both access it from anywhere and change the status of different tasks or add different tasks. And it was quite good. So here's a screenshot of the said platform. So here you can see all the different tasks and which ones were done and which weren't. As you can see, most of them I'm assigned to. And a lot of them are not started or still working on it, but they actually never got completed. Yes, I said there was quite a few issues and due to some lack of input and misinformation. So yeah, it wasn't too great. So the way I worked around it was that in the end, I ended up doing my own planning for myself using just a basic checklist every week that I came up with tasks that I wanted to complete with Adam in the meetings, and then I'd check them off as I went along. So here's the project Gantt chart. As you can see, the green is the things that I've done. The orange is Kirsten's work, and the blue ones are the things that have not been achieved. There was a decent effort, but I feel like it could have been better, to be honest. So yeah, there was also other issues that came into it. From my side, I had problem accessing university resources, having to use two computers, one remotely and one at home. Just the file duplications and things were a bit complicated, and football career. So yeah, next is the playtesting evaluation. So I did 3 different types of levels. One that was very simple and the player was a bit not too engaged, as there wasn't too much going on. The second one was a bit more engaging, but yeah, there was just a trap and that was it. And the third one was the one that actually included the AI mechanic, and the player was really engaged. They were trying to plan a route that wasn't too affected, and the increasing complexity did mean that the player forgot the initial number by the end of the level, but that would have been fixed with the UI that I intended in the design. So yeah, the progress code, the implemented code, as I said, has only been the parallax effect that I coded myself. And the unimplemented code, this is the structure that I intended to use for the AI. So yeah, it's a singleton class where there's different states for everything, for every behavior that I want the playable character to have, in order to jump, to be taken over, in order to pick up different things, and how that works with the animation. And as well as this, different singleton could be coded as well to give the background its own behaviors. Yeah, the reason why I wanted to have the background have its own behaviors is because in the playtesting session, the player really mentioned that the backgrounds look very nice, and due to it being like a side-scrolling platform, we want the background to be interesting, because sometimes, depending on what platform you start on, you have less input to do, and you're going to be looking at the game more. So having a lively background is very important for me. So yeah, this is the video demonstration. So first of all, here's the parallax and the background demonstration. That's of the first area, and that's of the second area. And next is the gameplay demo from the paper prototype. So that's would be a very simple level, as you can see, that has no AI or anything. And this is the one with the AI. Yeah, as you can tell, there was some hesitation there because the number had been forgotten. So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and if there was any questions, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks, George, for that presentation. That was quite good too. That was quite good and also quite insightful into the process and kind of like all the issues that you had. Yeah, I have a few questions.
Of course.
The first one I want to start is, well, you kind of talked quite a lot, a significant amount about your design.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of went through all your kind of narrative and story about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just thinking if you consider any of the kind of like fundamental narrative concepts when you were designing those parts. So for example, you have things like pace, and you have some kind of other kind of concepts that you could have applied. Another example is, for example, a hero's journey. So I'm just wondering if you used any of those when you were designing your story and your kind of background and your world.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to the map because that is where you can see the pace of the level. So at the start, it's very much just a hero's journey, a very simple one where you get a mission and it's just you're traversing the world. And then when you approach the castle, that's when you get to meet the king, and that is when really the story starts to ramp up because then you are revealed midway through the game that actually the quest that you were sent on wasn't really all that important, because what was actually happening was that the Jokers were actually stealing the Tree of Life, and that was why the world was starting to become ill. So yeah, I have considered that, and that's why from here on there's kind of like a different atmosphere to everything. It's more grimy and a bit more sad compared to the other half of the game, it being more of a traditional type of quest. So yeah, I have considered it, and yeah, I just wanted to have something a bit different and not be just a typical here's the quest, go get it, achieve it, and then be the hero. I just wanted it to be something a bit more interesting than that.
Okay, that's quite good. Yes, it would have been better if you told us that beforehand.
It's okay.
Kind of shows all your knowledge before, so it's better when you're talking to someone if you kind of tell them that you know all these things.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few more questions, but I'll leave Adam to do the next one, so it's a little bit better this way.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much for that. It was really nice to see. One question I did want to ask was about the testing that you presented. So you said it sounded like you played through it with some people. How many people did you test it with? How did you decide how to run that testing process?
So initially, I was waiting to have a testing level in the actual game, but due to the project not working as we were intending it to work. In the end, it came down to the wire, and I had to come up with something in order to test at least the core mechanics. So what I did was I only tested it with one person. Ideally, I would have used more people, but yeah, just due to the lack of time more than anything, it just didn't come across as something that was viable. And the way I did the testing was in Photoshop. It was literally just a paper prototype, just something to, more than anything, to demonstrate that the core mechanics would work and how really important the AI takeover mechanic was in order to make the game something that was actually engaging.
Okay, so the testing results you presented there were based on playing through the paper prototype then?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, okay, fair enough. And did you have any sort of testing plan for that? Were you just getting people to play the game and then noting down what they said, or were you asking them to do specific things?
So
like that?
It was a mixture of both. So basically, I had a set of things that I asked the person afterwards, but then at the same time, I was also just analyzing the way the player was behaving. Just subtle cues.
Yep.
Are really the ones that are important sometimes. So yeah, using both an interview afterwards, but also an observation based.
Yep. Okay. The other question I wanted to ask was about the design of the graphics. So you were starting off with the idea that this would be a mobile game, and you talked a little bit about how you'd adjusted the controls to be suitable for mobile.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how you did the graphical design. What were the kind of guiding principles behind that?
So due to it being a mobile game, I gravitated towards pixel art due to it just being very low, a low resolution image. It will be very light in order to then implement into a mobile game and have it run very smoothly. So that's the reason why that specific art style was chosen. And then through as the level starts in like a grassy area, you can see that there's a lot of greens, there's a lot of sky, but as the intended design is that as the player plays through the game, the colors change. So then to represent the mood of the game. So as you approach the castle, there's more gold, there's more white, there's more marble to represent that nobleness. And then when you get to the forest, there's more dark greens, more purples, more magical kind of colors. And then as you approach the Joker's city, there's more grimy like browns and more purples in order to represent that dirtiness and the illness of the world. So yeah, I'm not a specialized artist, but I love design, and it's something that I really believe is super important for a project. So yeah, those were my philosophies at the start of the project, definitely.
Okay, thanks for that. Stefano, do you have anything else you want to ask?
Yeah, I was just thinking about your previous question. So you were kind of designing the art and kind of working on it.
Mm-hmm.
But can you give us a better idea of how much you actually did for that? So it's mostly so we can judge the volume of your work. So did you manage to sketch a few of them?
So
how many levels you went through? Do you, for example, change some of them as well?
In terms of what I have actually done,
yeah. So
you still there?
I'm just thinking also for animations and things like that. So do you manage to animate your characters as well?
Hello?
Sorry, apologies.
I'll kill my video and see if
now?
that improves it.
Yeah, it's just my Wi-Fi sometimes. Yeah, my Wi-Fi sometimes just dies, but I fixed it now, so it's okay.
Yeah, sorry, that cut out for a minute for me as well. Sorry, Stefano, can you just repeat your question?
Yeah, so I was just wondering about the volume of work that you did for the art and animation. So I was
Yeah.
just wondering up to how many levels you did, for example. Did you actually did some animation states? What about the world design? For example, did you did a few of the grids? If you're thinking about a 2D kind of world, or if you're not
Yeah.
working with
So
grids, what just can you give us some kind of like an indication of up to what point do you got in terms of development for those?
So the initial, my initial view was to generate the assets. So here in the map, as you can see, there's the grassy plots, and you can see that it starts at level 1 and it goes all the way to level 14. So the idea was to generate assets for a certain area in order to then be able to, with those assets, design levels. So you don't necessarily have to use a grid because each level is independent, and when you finish one level, the next one is loaded. So it doesn't have to be, as you said, like a tile. But what I have done is develop the assets for the first 3 areas. So the grassy plots, where you can see there's the background has been done, the foreground with some different assets, and some character animations here. There's a sprite example that then, if you have a look at the video of the background at the end here, you can see that you have the little man here that's singing, and obviously the character movement and animation as well. I also did animation for the character to jump up and down, which was never used. And then that was for the first area, and for the second area here, as you can see, I've also worked on some buildings for the background. Some foreground images for, like, as you can see here, like a poker table. There's different. There's at least 4 different types of stands, market stalls, and the castle was actually in the works. As you can see here, there's some castle walls. So yeah, that's to the extent that the artwork has been done. So I'd say roughly, if you look at the map, I've done roughly like maybe 1/3 of the total artwork that was needed. I would say the reason why I haven't done more is because then I had to go on and do the coding for the parallax background, and also do the code and structure for the AI and all of that. So yeah, there was quite a lot of responsibility on my shoulders to push the project forward. And I wish that I would have been able to do more of the art, because I feel like it's something that it looks quite nice, even though it's not really my specialty. But I feel like it's something that is quite good, considering that this year has been the first time that I've ever actually tackled any type of artwork. So yeah, that's pretty much the volume of the art and the animation. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. I don't know if you, Adam, have another question, but
I do. I actually have
yeah.
a question that Stefano asked to a previous student,
Mhm.
which is, how much more time would you need to finish this? Based on your understanding of the project plan and how long the bits that you've done so far have taken, how much more time would you need to complete your implementation?
So it depends. If we are talking about just myself on my own, dealing with all of the code and all of the artwork, I would say maybe around another 2 months, maybe 2.5 months, 3 months. I would say not more than 4 months. I would say that would be the highest amount, but that is not my intention at all. I do have a very good friend of mine that is an incredibly talented programmer, and I do intend to work with him in the future. And if we were working on this together, say from starting next week or the week after, and I could actually just full on go at the artwork, and he would take care of all the code, I would say maybe in 2 months we would have the full game actually working with menus, with cinematic entries and events, and have it all actually working, because then I would actually be able to fully just do the artwork. Maybe 2-3 months. Maybe 2 months is not very realistic, but yeah, I would say it depends on if I have a team or not. but I would say not more than 5 months. That would be extreme.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for that.
No problem.
That's all my questions.
Just on your last question and your last answer, you just went from 2 months to 3 to 4 and to 5 at the end.
No. Okay, not 5. Yeah, 4 months. 4 months. I said 4.
Yeah.
4.
Come up with a reasonable estimate and double it.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking. Yes. Yeah. Just to keep things a little bit short and we don't go over the time. I would like to spend this time to give you a little bit of feedback about your
Yes.
kind of presentation and how things kind of went through. So I think you did put quite a lot of work in the design and kind of coming up with all these stories and word kind of narrative. I think, like I mentioned it before, I would like you to kind of explain a few of the concepts, or at least vocalize them a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly so you get used to do that. So whenever you go and go to an interview or kind of are presenting your work, they will kind of everyone that will be hearing you will be a little bit more reassured of your kind of skills and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something that you can kind of work on as you go along. It's something that you kind of get a little bit more experience as well.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of kind of the development and kind of the project management, I can see that you had a little bit of a struggle working with Karsten and also it was quite difficult with other things that you were actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the problems maybe came from the project management. So you kind of mentioned that you were kind of doing agile kind of sprints. So all these kind of problems that arrive, if you were doing kind of proper sprints, like 2 weeks sprints, you should have been able to catch up with all these issues quite early. I mean, that's the whole purpose of doing agile kind of sprint development.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I can see how this can be quite difficult, especially if you're working with a student kind of colleague, and kind of it's not easy to kind of tell them to actually finish their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I also think maybe the split of you doing most of the designing art and leaving Kirsty to do the development at the beginning probably could have been not the right way of going. And you kind of fix that a little bit later on by having your kind of scrolling background and parallax and developing that by yourself. So a little bit of maybe you kind of being a little bit more reactive would have helped. I think in my kind of experience, I think that would have helped a bit. But
Definitely.
like I mentioned before, all these things you kind of learn from them.
Absolutely.
So the next time you kind of will do them better and you know about all these kind of struggles and things like that. I think you try to get a little bit of feedback. That could have been a little bit more, I think. Kind of writing down what kind of feedback you got. That would have helped. But in overall, I can see quite a lot of effort in the design part, and also the effort in you trying to get the project kind of going and getting hands-on and trying to develop at least something, so you can get some kind of feedback and show us something. So I thought that was quite good in terms of your actual kind of master's project.
Thank you.
I think probably Adam has a little bit more comments to add as well.
I don't have a lot more to say. It was nice to see some discussion of the code design in there. I'd be tempted, if you're doing that in the future, to try and present it using UML or something like that. I think an informal description like that is helpful, but it's nice to be a bit more principled, so people don't have to kind of work out what your diagram means and that kind of thing. And similarly with when you're describing how you did testing, I mean, like the question I asked, whenever you're doing testing, think of it as doing science. So make sure that you're clear at the start about what it is you're trying to find out, what question you're asking how you did the design of your test and that kind of thing.
Of course.
Because then that puts the results that you've produced in context, and it means that if you are doing tests with different people, then you're being a bit more rigorous about making sure that you're actually getting consistent feedback across different people.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's the only extra things I'd noted down.
Great. So overall, it was quite good. So I'm quite glad. Hopefully you enjoyed not the whole project, but designing and building your world.
It was a learning process, definitely.
Yeah,
but yeah, I enjoyed all of
hopefully
it.
you kind of experience how is it working in these kind of things and throughout.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like a bigger kind of project. So you can learn from the experience. But thanks again, George, for presenting that. Me and Adam will go just now away and kind of decide on your final mark, and you'll see that popping along in Vision in a week's kind of time.
Okay.
So have a look at that, and you'll see all the kind of feedback and kind of final mark for your master's project. But thanks again for presenting that.
Thank you for coming and for being so helpful. Seriously, especially Adam and well, and you too. Just being understanding, it really helps, and I've learned so much. I feel like there's a few steps that I can now go on and take in order to make my projects in the future be actual success. So yeah, thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure supervising you.